A big welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us on this Thursday evening as we make our way into the fall and in the winter. It's a great way to kind of end the year on, you want to end the year knowing how to pitch your idea correctly. That's a great way, as I mentioned. So today, that's what we're going to talk about. We're obviously very happy to do this in partnership with Digital Switzerland, and we're also here to promote the hackathon itself. So again, this is a preparation for you. I hope you will join. Obviously, hackathons are always great. This one is always special due to the diversity part to it. And again, if you have questions, scan the QR code. I'm going to leave it up for another 20, 30 seconds. And of course, you can reach out to Claudia or the Digital Switzerland team. So, and you can see all the sponsors. Great stuff. Again, it's been run before, and a great way to get your way into tech or learn something new, obviously. Good. So anyways, I'll show this slide again towards the end, and again, I'll promote it at the end. Good. My name is Laurent Meyer. I am currently advisor to Constructor Academy, but I used to be the CEO. And I'll get into it in a little bit, but we're professional educators, and we know that it's not always about, what you learn, but it's also who you know and how to present it. So that's going to be the focus of today. If you want to reach out to me and connect with me on LinkedIn, more than happy to. I should have included a QR code, but you can find me. There aren't too many in the Zurich area with my name, and I'm always ready for for a brainstorming session and talk about the topic. What brings me to this talk, actually, because as we all know, and I probably should have mentioned it before, please feel free to raise your hand, interrupt me at any time. I honestly don't like to hear myself speak for too long. And again, this is an open session. If you do, you can write questions if you want. I don't know if is there the option to speak. You can raise your hand. That's always the best way. Claudia will let you speak. But again, this is an interactive session. Everything I'm presenting to you is just food for thought to get the conversation going. So again, please don't hesitate. So going back to what I said before about how I got into, sharing the best practices about presenting, is that myself and some great people, we created a coding and data science academy here in Zurich, and it's also now in Munich and remote, in 2017, where we offer programs, short courses or boot camps, on the topics of full stack development or software development or data science or UI UX, etc. We help people, we train people to go into these industries, right? Most of them are career changers or upskillers. And we have 1,100 graduates in great companies thanks to our programs. But again, the whole point is here, it's not really to promote this. I mean, obviously, it's always a self-promotion is always good, especially for those of you who want to get into tech, is that a core component of our programs is the end part, where you work on a real project and given by companies, and we teach you to not only how to develop it, but how to present it. And that's the in essence, this slide. So as I mentioned before, we've done a lot of capstone projects. Capstone projects are obviously, it's to show the work that it's to show what you've done after you've learned so many things. But in this case, the key learnings come from, students working on these prototypes. And on the last day, they present to a live audience, right? Because these students are looking for jobs and they want jobs, and they're looking to show you what they got. And that's a core component of each one of our boot camps, is really to build this portfolio to show to future employers, right? And here it's really fun. I love it, especially for our data science students, because they have very complicated ideas that they have to put together in a simple business presentation. Now, I know at the hackathon, it's much more technical, but there's always a business element to it. And the judges are not always technical, right? I know it's much more technical than usual, but still, everything applies, right? And I'll get into this during the presentation. But here, we had this amazing experience with these great students of helping them show what they developed and put it into simple terms. And that's not essentially what I'll do today. I mean, that's important for you in the future, but it always comes down to that. And the last point I make is that we practice each presentation 4 times during the last week to make sure they're presentable, because we do have 100, 200, up to 250 participants that come each time. Good. That's in essence. There's one more slide I wanted to cover. Before I get into this, I just want to pay tribute to the Hall of Fame. For me, some great presenters, right, in this world. You might not agree with them or agree with them politically, but or even on the business side with Steve Jobs. But I consider these people to be very good presenters. Steve Jobs, he always keeps a suspense coming every time there isn't, or he did, every time he introduced a new Apple product, right? Christine Lagarde, a very famous economist, and who's the second picture here. She always at these top posts, she always conveys a sense of rationalism, always very good, with complex economics matters. And I'm going to put another favorite presenter of mine, Barack Obama. Not necessarily, again, might not agree with him politically or not, but he just is the master of humor in presentation and using humor to get points across. So you have a mixture, suspense, rationalism, and humor, which obviously I would recommend that you take a little part of. Good. Just wrapping up the intro here. There are 2 points, or I mean, two sections to this presentation in terms of getting your pitch ready or your presentation. Number one is we're going to focus on how to get the right structure in place, because the structure is super important, right? And the second is, in addition to the structure, we're going to add some important techniques to really master this. It's another case of practice makes perfect. And a hackathon is the best way really to do it, because you get to work on the technical or the business challenge in a short period of time, and then you get to present. So good. Again, these are the 2 sections of this presentation. Any questions before we start? Good. Doesn't matter. You can ask your questions anytime. So the part 1, the structure. This is a really important point. Probably, if this could be your biggest takeaway today, I would be happy. In a presentation, you have the beginning, the middle, and the end. The beginning and the end you get automatically, right? The beginning, you have to start somewhere. The audience quiets down and everybody gets ready for your pitch, right? So everybody's focused. And then you have the end, right? The end is for the good or for the bad. People are waiting for it, right? If it's for the good, it's because they really want to know what happened, or what the conclusion is. Or for the bad, they just want this thing to be over with, right? So what makes a great presentation? Well, obviously the beginning and the end are important, but to really keep people keep people focused and attentive, you have to make sure that the middle is good as well. Because otherwise, well, you're going to lose people. They won't understand what's going on. And as I mentioned before, they're going to want to see the next presentation because you lost them. Good. So let's look at this structure, right? How to make sure that the right structure is in place from the beginning, right? And how to keep people engaged throughout. And this is not rocket science. It's very hard to do. And again, it's not magical. As I mentioned before, right? It takes practice for this, and yeah, you might get some feedback along the way. But the easiest way to approach this is a story approach. Everybody loves a good story. We all know that, right? So let's think about a movie, a Hollywood movie, for example, right? Or a book or a movie, same thing. It's a story. You want to keep things in logical sequence, and every story begins with a once upon a time, right? Once upon a time, I went to a hackathon, and they put me together in a team, and you present yourself, who you are, who your team members are, etc. And of course, the whole point of a hackathon is to move into chapter 2, right? Because there is going to be a challenge. They're going to give you a challenge, right? They're going to have some company uh, give a data set or some kind of challenge, and you're going to have to solve it, right? So that goes to chapter 3. The challenge is introduced on chapter 2, and you are going to work in chapter 3. You're going to work hard in your team. You're going to detail how you did it, and you're going to build up the suspense until the chapter 4, where you're going to solve this thing, right? You're going to present your findings, right? And this is what, hopefully, if you do a very good job, the people in the audience will go home and get together with some friends and tell them, hey, I had this really, really good pitch during this hackathon, and I learned this and that from it. Okay. So, sounds simple, not easy to do, right? Because it's super easy to go off tangent. And let's just, before I give you some quick tips and tricks, let me just focus on each section. So the beginning is very important to get right? Because if you don't start off on a logical point, on a clear point, people will not be able to use this as a reference point as your pitch continues, right? So you have to answer who, what, when, and why, right? That's really, really important. You don't need to go too much into detail because that's the other chapters, but it's important in terms of a presentation that you have an introduction that makes sense. Introductions are very important. People love introductions because it sets the tone, and also a clear agenda of what is going to be covered. Now, some people, and I've seen this happen a lot, especially in the presentations of our students, they just rush the intro, right? So we have no idea what's really going on, and we have to catch up for the rest of the presentation in the middle part, and we might just give up, right? Because we don't really know what's going on. So make sure, I know many times you only have 3 minutes or 5 minutes, but make sure you hit all the key points on who, what, when, and why, that in the beginning. Very important. Then we get to the middle, the part that you really have to keep people engaged. You don't want to lose them, right? Even if it's 3 minutes. In the 2-minute mark, you can't have people thinking about looking at their phones, or thinking about the next presentation, or staring up at the ceiling, right? So this is where you keep people engaged. How do you do that? Well, you try to give people in the audience something to think about, right? You're preparing the conclusion and you're preparing the end, and you got to keep them engaged. Nice visuals are important. Thought-provoking statements. Humor is a great way to get people. Obviously, you have to be careful with that. You don't want to say something offensive, but you can say something funny, like Obama, and you can keep the suspense going, as the last point, like a Steve Jobs. And then you can use the rationality of a Christine Lagarde in the middle, where you dive deep into the heart of the problem, right? And I think that's important. The presentation is cut off, so we can't see the whole slide. That is unfortunate. I don't know what to do with that. Maybe if I take it out of presentation mode, how about that? Can you see it better? Good. Okay. Sorry, everybody. I won't put it into presentation mode. I know it's annoying, but just bear with me. So the middle is really the part to keep, and these are ways to keep people engaged, right? You can do the demo is also, a demo is a great way to keep people engaged. Just again, the demo is another story, because obviously you have to make sure that the demo is pertinent and simple, and not too fast, and that it really addresses the key issue. And then we have the happy ending, right? But before getting to the end, it's important to repeat. Repetition, or a summary of what has happened before, right? Very quick, just to hit on the key points that were mentioned before you give them the wow effect, right? Now, it's not easy giving them the wow effect, I understand, but it has to be something interesting, right? You might be working on a boring project that's very simple. The conclusion is simple. Add a little spice to it. Please, we're waiting for that. So don't disappoint us. And the last point, and people always love this, is leave the door open, right? And during your hackathon, you can't do everything. You can't clone the next Google. So you got to leave the door open for some other features or something that will happen in the future. You didn't close a chapter, right? On the problem. You really keep things open. And I don't know if you can recognize can anybody recognize that image on the right? One of my favorite movies. Just to keep you guys engaged. Nope, not the Joker. Thanks, Margarita. Good guess. It's the shot. Thank you, Ina. It's the Shawshank Redemption. Absolutely. What a great movie. What a great ending. Again, um, that's what, that's a pretty happy, that's as good as a happy ending as you're going to get. Fantastic. So, where do pitches go wrong, right? This is a big one. And number one is the chapters gets mixed up. That's number one, where sometimes you don't necessarily introduce correctly the problem, and then you have to go and you realize that, and you go back to the beginning, and then you're going to show your solution, but then you think you forgot it, and then you're going to go back to the business problem, and then you might give a hint at the conclusion before it's too late. You just go all over the place, right? You don't stick to the storyline. I mean, I know there are some movies that go back and forth in the past and whatever, but they still have something to do with the story, right? And sometimes that's when things go wrong. Now, number two is there's not really a selling point. There's not really a value added from what you've done, right? There's no differentiation. Like your results are just too simple. Like we didn't learn anything from that. Now I know you've been working on complex models and you didn't get the results that you really wanted. But again, you have to work on positioning it in a way that will have, you'll go out with a bang. And that's not easy, but I would not be satisfied with simple results or boring stuff. And again, you can get feedback from somebody or your the fellow participants or the people in your team. Very important. Number three, this is a big killer. This is a showstopper. When you're working on something and you really want to show people that you have what it takes and that you've been working real hard and whatever, and you think that translates to showing them how smart you are or how technical this was. This really is dangerous because this is how you're going to lose them, especially the people that are not too technical. Like, please don't go too far in that way. Maybe you might one day have to give a really technical presentation, and that's fine. But again, consider, and this is going to be a point I'm mentioning a little bit later, don't go off into tangents that are very technical. We know you're smart. We know you worked hard. Give us something interesting. That's what we came to see. Now, this one also is very tied to the previous point, is that you've been working on this for 24 hours, you didn't get any sleep, you get stuck in your own little world, right? Or your team does. And you start thinking that everybody's on the same page as you. Well, that's not the case. You got to come down to earth, right? We know you've been working hard and we know you've been tackling complex issues, but we don't know the algorithm that you're using. We don't know what neural networks are. We don't know what some complicated financial term or acronym, etc. Make sure that you save time to explain it to us. And the last one, and we all know that this is also what leads to some problems, is not enough practicing, right? There are going to be many team members in your team, and you're going to have to make sure that they all present, or that it's not just one person presenting. So you're going to have to, go back and forth between presenters, and kind of like a baton in a relay, right? You have to make sure that you pass on the baton in time and you don't drop it, right? It's very important to practice, especially transitions. And most people don't save enough time for that, and you can see it during the presentation. Good. That again, this is not going to be a long monologue. I have about 10 max 15 minutes left. The goal is really for you to take the best findings. We could talk about this till for the next week, right? And go into every single detail. I'm trying to keep this very high level because it's important. Most important is to really, these are not the only tips and tricks in the world. There are a bunch of videos on YouTube and everything. I think questions are also important to get answered, but I think it's important to get the fundamentals and actually put them in practice, right? And that's the beauty of the hackathon, especially when you have all the judges there. So the second part is the techniques, but the techniques really they go along with the first part, right? Um, uh, you got to get the structure right, but you also have to have the right techniques. And I've already mentioned some of the techniques. And this second part is devoted to focusing on some of the major ones, right? There's so much that goes into a presentation and a pitch, right? Can't get everything right. You can try. You can't get everything right. But as long as you have, 10, 15 principles, maximum 15 principles, I think you can get it right. It's just like anything that you learn. When you go to school, you write your notes, and then you go home, do your homework, or prepare your thesis or whatever. It's all about applying it, right? That's the most important because it's like everything. It's easier said than done, and a lot of people don't like to present. But when you do present, and when you do practice, when you do practice, and when you do get these fundamentals inside your head, it increases the chances that you'll get better at it. And when you get better at something, then you're less nervous about it and you're more confident, right? I mean, I can use an example. As you can tell, I'm not an I'm a native English speaker. I'm from California, and I came to Switzerland, and I was very intimidated by the German language. I didn't like it, tell you the truth, right? But then I started practicing it, and then I got a little fluent. I can start speaking some words, and I got to a pretty good level. Now, honestly I like it. I think it's a nice language, and again, I didn't think that before. It's kind of like presenting. People don't like presenting, but if you can learn how to do it right, it all of a sudden, trust me, it's not that big of a deal, right? And this allows you really to focus on the technical parts. So good. Let's get comfortable. Let's close this up and get you comfortable with it, with some additional techniques. So these are my favorites. I'm just listening in here. But again, I'll go over them in more detail. And again, I've already mentioned 5 or 6 other ones, right? Don't go off tangent, right? Don't mix up your chapters. Those are pretty clear. And again, I mean, most of them are just common sense. But let me get into some other ones. So know your audience, use simple visuals, show conviction when you speak, keep it simple, and details matter, etc., etc. So let's start with know your audience. And this is the one that always, our students always have a little tough time adjusting because it's a business audience. So when you're learning technical things and you have to present to a business audience, that really means that you have to make the switch, right? And in our case, I always make the joke in our data science program, we teach machine learning, and I always tell the students, well, don't assume people know machine learning. They didn't take your course. You should be able to explain machine learning to your grandparents, right? That's the kind of level you want to be at, right? Now, you also want to make sure that there's something in it for everybody, right? You don't in a general presentation, in the business presentation, there'll be all kinds of people. There'll be younger people, there'll be technical people, there'll be financial people, there'll be business people, there'll be software developers, there'll be data scientists. You never know who's in the audience, right? So make sure there's something in it for everybody. But the most important is to know who your audience is. Right? And in the hackathon, that it's obvious it's pretty technical. But the first thing I would do is find out who the judges are, find out where they come from, and that's usually listed publicly. And then take a quick look and then adapt accordingly, right? If the judge is a data scientist in the financial sector, well, you'll know that he or she obviously has a lot of knowledge in that, and if your product it goes in that direction, make sure to put a special emphasis on that. Right? But again, get that information, know your because that helps you do what? That helps you set the level of complexity. And yeah, obviously, we'd all love to be in a room full of people who know exactly from the same, professional background as you in the same domain. That allows you to go much more technical, but that's not always the case. So you get to adapt your message accordingly, right? Now, as I mentioned, easier said than done, but it's got to be in your mind. Definitely, it's got to be on your mind. Second technique, one where so many people get it wrong, right? Simple visualizations are the key. As you can see, I give you an example, right? You turn this chart into this, right? Now, there's a very famous, Anglo-Saxon expression. I'm sure it's translated into other languages. A picture is worth 1,000 words, right? But it's only that picture. You don't have to put all those words, right? So that helps you get rid of unnecessary text. Just like I had to do with this presentation, I had to go to Google and find images for this, right? And as you can see, there's not so much text on my slide. I mean, I can always do less, but yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to not have to write all over this slide to convey a message. Yeah, and the second point is, you don't need all the complex stuff. Keep it for yourself. Like we know, again, we know all this stuff. We know you know that stuff, but give the audience this simple stuff. That's what we're looking for because we're looking to stay engaged. This next one, as we all know, is it could be a maker or breaker, right? You're trying to convince. This is the art of sales. That's essentially what it is. I mean, you might not like sales, but you're selling right now because without sales, you're not gonna push this forward. You're not gonna convince the jury, right? You have to show that you believe in what you produced, right? Now you don't need to exaggerate. You don't need to overboard it. You don't need to do too much because that has the counter effect. But the most important thing is to show energy, right? Nobody likes monotone voices. People like, um, exclamation, important points being made throughout. People that speak really, you can see that they're speaking with their gut, right? You can see they really believe in it. So be energetic, keep that tone consistent, and don't forget to smile. Smile, smiles can change the world, right? That's important. Keep that smile. A lot of people tend to present and forget about, and it just look too serious, right? Because it shows their nervousness, or it shows and they're not really convinced of what they're presenting. You need to keep all of those three. Very important. As I mentioned, don't overdo it because then that just becomes annoying. But stick to the point. My favorite one of my favorites, is keep it simple, right? As Einstein says, and I always show our students this one, they don't always apply it, but again, you got to keep Einstein happy, right? If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And it's always easier to start simple and they get more complex, then to go complex and then have to go all the way back to becoming simple, right? Because that takes a lot of time. And again, you confuse the audience when you get too complex. So always remember Einstein. He's a man of simplicity. Coming back, so again, going to another really important point, and you can see this on a lot, is that details really matter. And this one kind of goes in hand with the simplicity thing. Make sure that, for example, make sure that there's a consistent structure on your slides, right? you obviously have your first slide, right? If I show you, I mean, this one's always good, right? And then you have your core slides, and make sure that it's where can I show you one? You know, again, make sure the top part is right and everything else aligns, right? I think that's a really important point. Like here, this part aligns with this, and you don't have too much stuff going away. And as I mentioned before, and um, also, it's important to remind people where they are. I saw a really good presentation the other day. They actually had they had enough space for it, which is not always the case. They showed you on the bottom at what part of the presentation you were at, right? So, example, if you were in the solution section or the section of they showed you with the big thing where you were. I really appreciate that. That it was really easy to follow along. And of course, spelling mistakes, grammar, all that stuff. But again, alignment is super key. Good. Just have two more slides to show you. The first one, again, kind of like the middle part being so important in the presentation. This is another one. It's not just about a hackathon. It's not just about pitching your business idea or any place. At the end of the day, it always comes down to presenting. And you know that. You've done it before. You can have the best idea in the world, but if you don't present it correctly, or if you don't adapt it to the right crowd, or you just put a bunch of complex slides up there, or you don't, people don't know where you are in the presentation, you don't have right visuals, all these things, then yeah, obviously it's going to play against you. So good. Use this hackathon if you're going to participate, a job as an excuse to present better. Job interviews are always, you're presenting yourself there, right? Presenting to the CFO, presenting to your fellow software developers, whatever. I mean, it's always comes down to presenting. Good. This is me, as I mentioned before. I'm be more than happy to take this offline. Happy to connect over LinkedIn. Again, I'm really passionate about education, but I'm also passionate about practical and project-based education. I think that everything that you should learn you should also have an opportunity to apply it. And also, and just like in higher education or professional education, you should also be able to learn soft skills that are important for you to get the job and presentation skills that are important for you to convey your idea. One more, thing about the hackathon. One more plug about the hackathon. The QR code is there. I'm gonna leave it here. I'm gonna leave it up, and I'm gonna take your questions. I hope that was helpful. I hope that my story was clear and that my chapters made sense. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have a first question, and any way to turn the audience on? Who's giving me? Somebody's giving me some claps. I'll take them. We have a first question, and I don't know if I can answer it. Maybe Claudia can. For the hackathon, how long are the presentations going to be? Who is the audience for the presentation? And are we also allowed to interact with the audience? You, okay, and I have a second similar question from Ashna. I can answer them, even though I mean, most hackathons have similar formats. So unless anybody can answer that question, I'll take it. Most hackathons I've seen, I've seen it in two formats. One, you present only to the jury in a closed room, right? But never more than 3 to 5 minutes, because you can't, just more than that, it's not possible. People just don't have the time. But the most common hackathon I've seen is that you present it to a live audience with the jury members, um, and everybody claps, and only the jury member, and then jury members see all the presentations, and then they go back and decide in the closed room. But I would doubt you would have more than 5 minutes. 5 minutes seems like a short time, but I consider it to be very long, because you should be able to convey your message by then, right? That's the best answer I can give you. Next question. Unless Ekaterina is here. Ekaterina, you remember how it was last time? If you're here. All right. I'll get to your other question, Ash. Now, first, I'm going to answer Aline. For me, it can be difficult to tell a story in a logical way. Do you have tips on how to organize the ideas before building the presentation? Well, that's a good question. And again, this is the part where it's not easy to do. I have the chapter approach. Again, the biggest suggestion I could say is, which section do your points fit in, right? Where is it? You can map this out and see which section each one of your thoughts goes in, right? Or when you build the slides, it's like everything. You have to build a prototype, right? You have to build the rough draft, and that's the most important thing to do, is to build it. Then you can place the various pieces into the various chapters. And then obviously feedback from others helps. Doing it alone, obviously, the only person that will understand it is yourself, right? But yeah, put it together, put a first version together. It's not going to be perfect, and then see where everything fits, and then you're gonna have to rearrange it. That's the best answer I can give you. Ashna writes, "This is going to be my first hackathon. What are the topics that our pitch will be around?" So again, as we don't have a representative for Digital Switzerland here, just based on my experience, most topics are always about doing good for the environment or for the world, right? So you're gonna get a case study, a mini case study given by a company, where it's the same. It's very similar. Develop an app or a process, to solve a certain problem, right? Climate change or poverty. If it's more on the business side, well, a company will say, "Hey, listen, we're going to give you this and this data, help improve our revenue process." Yeah. Thanks, Kevin. Kevin, and you can feel free to say something about this, right? Am I on the right page? In terms of everything will have a purpose, right? That's what the topic will be. Now they're going to break you up into teams, and not everybody in the hackathon will be a software developer. Everybody will bring their expertise in one form or another. Obviously, it's good to have a very complete team, and that's the beauty of it, right? Everybody contributes in the way they can. That's why it's important. Diversity is important. Does the solution, so let me just put the questions up here. It's always easier. Does the solution demo come after the presentation, or we embed it into the presentation? What is the best practice? Again, I would highly assume that the demo would be with the presentation. Definitely. That's the way I've always seen it. So in this case, the demo, let's look at the chapters. the demo would go in chapter 3, right? That's where the demo would go. And then you would in the chapter 4, you would close it out by just reiterating what happened and adding anything to that's pertinent to the results. So yes, definitely include it inside. Okay, let me just make this a little bit bigger. I don't know why I can. Here we go. Come on, get bigger. Okay. So thanks, Stephanie, for mentioning that point. Stephanie writes, you are also not alone. Your group will be there and can help with reasoning, structure, logic, and so on for the pitch, or you're doing it together anyways. Absolutely. This is a teamwork. That's the beauty of it. As I mentioned before, you're not alone. Obviously, if you are presenting alone in a different circumstance, yeah, you should, again, never do this alone. Talk to people. It just makes you better. Good. There was a question to Kevin. This is a question for Kevin. How do you get a hold of the previous workshops? Kevin, can you help? Yeah, again, here we go. About the recording. Yeah, I mean, everybody has the presentation organizers have your emails if you registered. So I'm sure they'll be reaching out to you shortly. Ina asked, will only one rep from the team present? Again, I've seen many different formats. Sometimes it's one person. I prefer when everybody presents. That just takes a little more practice because it shows that everybody's worked on it. If it's 3 minutes, the presentation's in 3 minutes, yeah, you might want to choose one person. Again, it depends on the length and how can I say, how many team members and how well you practice transitions. Thank you, Kevin. You might want to put your email in there just for everybody. Any more questions? Let me just put I forgot to put the QR code in my presentation for my, so I'm going to put it in the chat for those of you I'm not connected with. Coming right now. Give me a second. It's also an opportunity for you to ask more questions. So it looks like the Figma presentation was a big hit. All right. Any last questions? That's a good question, you know. You have to make it. You have to make the time. At one point, you just got to be. I mean, I've seen this happen so many times, and people are trying to put as many functionalities and many things as possible. Now you have to think back to how important are those functionalities. You have a short period of time, right? Better to set an alarm and say, hey, listen, 2 hours before, no more developing. Let's focus on the pitch. Because obviously in a hackathon, time is the most important thing, actually. So yeah, make sure you save enough time for that. Easier said than done. But again, the best way is to cut the list of functionalities in half. Yeah. Thanks, Margarita, for the details. Clara, that is a good question. That is a very good question. Obviously, you want to be original and stand out from the crowd and not to be boring, right? Now, if you're going to ask a question, that's fine. You can just make sure it's a quick yes or no answer, right? That it's the yes or no's are always the best. I wouldn't say, does anybody have an example of a time that where you did this? No. Obviously, a yes and no would be good because time is of the essence, right? Another thing is like, how many out there are software developers? Raise your hand. How many out there are in the finance world? That takes a little time. So a simple yes or no, yeah. But that's nice because it gets the audience really engaged. Definitely. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're done. A big thanks to everybody. For those of you participating in the hackathon, I wish you all the best. I hope that was helpful. And I wish, again, I'll see you there if you're there. Thanks, everybody. I'm